Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen now. So as Barry said, so I'll be talking about performance testing 101. But before that, I guess just a quick intro about myself. So my name's Marie. I've been doing software testing for 10 years now, but currently I work as a developer advocate for K6 at Grafana Labs. So this is a pretty new role for me. I only started this role just over 8 months ago. So let me just admit more people into the workshop. Okay. But yeah, so I'm currently living in London, UK, but I'm from the Philippines originally. So that's enough about me. Let's just focus on the workshop. So if you want to grab a hold of the slide, so I've added a QR code here, which you are free to scan. Alternatively, what I can do as well is I can, add a link to the slides. But if you can all scan it, so if you want to use the slides afterwards, then the QR code is here. So let's just give it 5 more seconds and then I'll go over on the next slide. Okay. Since this is an interactive workshop, so there would be activities where there would be some actual testing or like actual coding that might take place. So it would be great if everyone has Google Chrome installed, which I think all of us would have already. For the coding part, so because we'll be using K6, a prerequisite is there should be some basic knowledge of JavaScript. But if you're not too familiar, that's okay. I'll just explain the code by detail. And the most important bit, so while I'm talking to the different slides, it would be good if you could install K6 as part of your local machine. So I've added the link there for the installation, which is k6.io/docs/get-started/installation. So there's instructions there on how to use on how to install K6, whether you're using Mac, Windows, or Linux. So it would be really useful if you can all install that. However, if you just want to, watch along and you want to see, how to use K6 from how I'm running it, then you're also just feel free to watch. But if you want to, follow along and run the test manually as well as part of your machine, then it would be good if you can all install K6. Okay, so moving on. There you go. So I like to start this workshop with a story. So I don't know if anyone here has ever played Overcooked. It's a video game that I've been playing with my 6-year-old now. And we haven't played it recently, but like over like the past couple of months, it's something that we have played. So it's a game where you have to basically pass like different kitchen levels and cook different food, and the levels get increasingly harder and harder. And there is a link here between the actual game and the actual talk. So I'll get into that in much more detail, but just some background. So it's a really fun game. So as you can see on this screenshot here, everything looks normal. I'm getting orders, they're flowing in nicely. You can see that I have 212 coins, so I'm getting a lot of tips because I am getting the sushi order served right on time. As the game gets harder, so you get more orders than expected, it might come to a point where your teammates are overwhelmed, there's lack of coordination, and without proper coordination and teamwork in place, you can see that the kitchen is now on fire. You're also not getting tips anymore, so you can see that my coins is now set to 0. and you have a lot of like angry customers, waiting for their food. So because they're hungry and they haven't received their food orders on time. Because the kitchen, it can't keep up with the overflowing orders, from customer. It's just, starting to look like chaos. The whole kitchen is now on fire. Of course, this is a very dramatic representation, but ultimately, like, you get the picture. So, customers are unhappy. Your reputation is at risk. You've got like negative, like score now. And the kitchen is just such a mess that you can't even cook one single potato. Now, if I relate this back to my workshop and how that game is related to performance, just imagine that, the kitchen is quite similar to if you're trying to buy some items, during Black Friday or Cyber Monday sales. So you found the item that you like, you've added it to your cart, but then suddenly the website that you're using has crashed. So it can't suddenly keep up with the overwhelming number of requests from like different users simultaneously. And as you can see from like the different like screenshots here from different users, this is actually quite a very common phenomenon during Black Friday sales. So you've got upset customers, you're probably losing money because the amount of money that you'd rather earn, you're losing it because you're not able to sell the products because your website has crashed. Most of the time as well, the simple response is, let's just get more servers, thinking that this will fix the performance problems. However, if you're not doing your homework properly. So if you just decide to buy, a lot of servers, which will end up costing you a lot of money, you might not get a better return for your investment, because if you don't understand first your application's internal performance, you don't understand like how to make performance improvements, then all your investments will not really like be as valuable as you hope. Now, let's get to the more serious part. So, in order for us to make sure that our users have a positive user experience, it's not enough that, the feature works as expected from a functional view. So, we also have to do performance testing. Now, the way I would define performance testing. So this is an area, or this is a practice where you measure and you evaluate how your system responds under, certain workloads. So when I think of performance tests, this is when I'm concerned about my application speed, my application's availability, the reliability, and how stable my application is if I've suddenly exposed it to, high amount of users, or if I just try to, test it from like a different angle apart from like this, does the function actually work? What about things like, has it actually loaded in the amount of time that I want? Has the pages, from a browser perspective, has it rendered the elements that I need on time? Or are there any network requests that are blocking certain features to work? So I'll be concerned about that. So I guess for our first activity, I think currently we are 29 people. So actually it will be 31 now. So what I'll do is maybe it might be more useful, and probably people are more comfortable to share if I put you into like small breakout rooms, and we'll probably just spend about like 3 or 4 minutes here. So I just want to have a discussion on why do you think it's important to test for performance, and if you have any examples where you yourself have been frustrated by an application's performance. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put people into breakout rooms. Let me just admit one more. And I'll create 5 breakout rooms. So that's gonna be about 5 to 6 people per room. Let me just create that. And yeah, so hopefully I'm gonna open all rooms, and feel free to have some discussion. So I'll close the rooms for about, like, I'll keep it open for like 5 minutes, and then if you can all go back to the main room, that will be really useful. If you have any questions as well, feel free to ask away. So I'll see you all in 5 minutes.
I think everything is set, Marie.
Okay, yep.
No
Thank
problems, huh?
All right, yep, no
I'm
problem.
here to help
Okay,
anytime.
I'll just
you.
admit. I think there's still some few people waiting. Okay. Hopefully everyone is back on the main room, and I wasn't there to listen to your discussions, but hopefully some of you, might have some fruitful discussion. So for me personally, it's important to test for performance because especially nowadays, there's a lot of like areas where we have to improve the user experience, and there's a lot of studies out there that shows that speed, or like just the availability of your application, it really has an impact to how your users perceive your application. So there's actually some studies out there that I've read where people are much more forgiving if, for example, you show like a 404 page, or like you show like an error page, as opposed to them waiting for such a long time just to get the information that they need. So it's definitely important that, yeah, we need to make sure that our application not only behaves functionally, but also from like other aspects such as performance, or, accessibility, or like other areas that your application also focuses around that. A personal example. So last year I tried to get tickets, like a concert ticket to try to watch Blink 182, but I couldn't because like the queues are just so long. And by the time I was close to the queue, the whole, website just crashed. So that was such an awful experience because I waited a long time only to find out that when I was near, the like my view on my phone screen wasn't like responding at all. So when we speak of performance testing, like there's often this misconception that it's all about load testing, but actually that is not the case. So performance testing, this is just the umbrella term for any type of performance test. So this could be back-end performance, this could be front-end performance, and load testing is just really one type of performance testing. So in a nutshell, when I speak about load testing, so this is checking that your application behaves as expected if it's been exposed to like your average, like expected load. So if we go a bit deeper, there are other kinds of load testing types as well that you can perform depending on like your business needs. So you have smoke testing, and then you have load testing itself, and then you also have things like stress testing and then spike testing, which falls under that. And then there's also soak testing. I'll explain each one in more detail. So smoke testing. So this might be something that you are already familiar with, but from a load testing perspective, this is where you verify that your system can handle the minimal load without any problems. So it's helpful to run a smoke test to verify, for example, that your test script has no errors, or that your system still works as expected under a very minimal amount of load. Now, if I link this back to the Overcooked video game that I mentioned at the early start, this would be, for example, cooking with one order, and then you just want to check that all your equipments are still working as expected. Now, load testing. So as I mentioned already, this checks how your application behaves if it's exposed to, the average expected amount of virtual users who are sending multiple requests at a given time. Now, this is useful if you want to measure, let's say, your application's performance under, the typical or like the peak system load. So an advice, so when you're starting with load testing, you want to start with small numbers in case your pre-production environments are not solid yet. So it's also a good idea to understand the expected traffic on your website to get a better representation, because you want your test to properly simulate like a much more like realistic working condition. Now, in overcooked terms, so load testing would be, let's say I want to cook like the typical order of 4, and I want to check if the kitchen can keep up being stable if this is the typical amount of orders at any given time. Then you have stress testing. So stress testing, this basically assess like how your system performs at its limits when the load exceeds the expected average. So you would want to use the stress testing if you want to verify the stability and the reliability of the system that you are trying to test if it's been exposed to heavy use. Now, systems may receive higher than usual workload. So if you have moments where you have a system that process, deadlines or, for example, things like paydays, which might, cause above average traffic, then you would want to perform a stress test as part of those scenarios. Now, I couldn't really see an overcooked image with, more than like, I guess the average orders. But if I relate the stress testing back to overcooked, just imagine that you are presented with a lot of orders gradually than you are used to. And then within stress testing, there's also spike testing. So this is where you verify whether the system survives and performs under a sudden and massive rush of traffic. So doing spike testing, this is useful when the system may experience like events that would cause like a massive, amount of traffic, such as Black Friday sale. So this is where like the traffic is very sudden, it comes and go, and it's not really your average load. So this is where you would want to do spike testing. Now, if I link this back to overcook, just imagine that, let's say you're already cooking like 5 orders, and then suddenly you've been asked to cook, 5 or 6 more orders at the same time. So suddenly there is this sudden spike of orders. So you need to make sure that, your kitchen can still handle the sudden rush of orders while you're already cooking a lot. And then finally, you have soak testing. So soak testing, this is concerned with your system's reliability over a longer period of time. So with soak test, you can see that it's quite similar to load testing, but then you're actually extending your test for, a longer period of time. Let's say at least 2 hours or something. It's useful to do soak testing because if you want to test that your system doesn't suffer from any memory leaks, or if you want to identify if there are any race conditions that can only happen like sporadically, then soak testing can help you find this issue. I couldn't find any more overcooked image, but just imagine that with soak testing, this is similar when you're cooking your expected amount of orders, but then you're also working like long shift hours, so you're not really taking any break. Now, there's another activity, but this time rather than putting everyone in the breakout rooms, just feel free to type the answer on the chat, or unmute yourselves and then just say the answer. But basically, I want to test your knowledge, see if you're listening about the different types of load testing that I just discussed. There is a trick question. So there is one type of testing that I haven't specifically covered, which isn't really part of load testing. So I wonder if people would be able to notice that. So the first question, it's a type of performance test where it's checking that it can operate reliably if it's been exposed to the normal expected load for a period of time. Does anyone want to have a guess as to what this type of performance testing is? So Arda said soak testing. Do we have any other answers? Okay, Ilker also said soak. Any other? Load. Okay, so for this, I'll have to go with Martin. So the keyword here is normal expected load for a period of time. So the difference with soak and load is soak is you're actually doing it for like an extended period of time. With load testing, this is just, okay, you just want to verify what the expected load, let's say for a period of time such as like 10 minutes or like 30 minutes or so. So that's when you would do load testing. There's a question from Emir. How do we determine normal and above normal? So this is when you would have to, research like if you have, I guess, like data where you can see the amount of traffic that your website has on like certain days, and you can basically see what the average is, then that could be your normal traffic. Above normal, if you have like peak time, such as let's say every 9 a.m. your website has this above average traffic, then you would use that data. So it's really useful to get to know your system, get to know the data as well, for you to find out what is normal and above normal. Okay, the next question is a type of load testing where it's checking that it can still operate if it's been exposed to extreme or heavy load. So Akangwa mentioned stress. Are there any other answers? Yep. So I think, yeah, this one, mostly everyone got it right. So this would be stress testing. Black swans, or do you mean like Black Friday sales, where it's an extremely rare event? So this would involve so I mentioned a while ago a type of stress testing called spike testing. So again, you would want to monitor, let's say if you have like special events and you're announcing like, okay, for an e-commerce website, you're announcing like a lot of discounts, then you would want to monitor what the traffic is for that. So one thing about performance is you would want to use observability as well when you want to measure the performance. So it's really useful to have like data as well that can guide you. So this is where observability platforms can help. But yep, Black Friday sales. So as I mentioned, this can be detected by performing like spike testing. Okay, so moving on, a type of load testing where it's checking that it can still operate if it's been exposed to a minimal load. This is served for sanity checks. Anyone want to have a guess? Yep, smoke. Yep, so I think this one, we're all in agreement. So I'll move on. A type of stress testing that immediately overwhelms the system with an extreme surge of load. Yep, so this is spike. So the main difference between spike and stress testing is with spike, there's no room for ramping up traffic. You just immediately, let's say, introduce like, I don't know, like 30 virtual users or something immediately. Whereas with stress testing, you're gradually increasing this number. Whereas with spike, you just really want to hammer, your system's performance like immediately. Okay, so a type of testing where you are intentionally trying to harm an application in production. So this is the trick question. It's not something that I have discussed, but I think it's still useful for us to know. I think there's one speaker who will be talking about chaos testing. So this is where we're intentionally trying to introduce faults, we're trying to harm our application, and then see how that basically has a reaction to like the application that you're testing. So I won't cover chaos testing as part of this, but I think it's a good type of test to get familiar, to get ourselves like familiar off, because I think in the future, chaos testing is something as well that we as testers also need to look into, but that's a different type of talk. Finally, a type of load testing where it's checking the reliability of applications when it's been exposed to a normal expected load over a longer period of time. Yep, so this is soap testing. Okay. So I think, yeah, mostly, everyone got the questions right. So at least, you now have, an idea as to what the different load testing types are and how you can use it on different scenarios. So I'll move on. Performance testing as well. When you think about the approaches, this is typically divided into two areas. We have front-end performance. So this aims at testing how fast a user can see the web responses instantly. There are, of course, different tools that can help you measure, but as part of this workshop, I'll only talk about Google Lighthouse to see how that can help you with identifying performance improvements to your web pages. Then on the other hand, you also have backend or server-side performance testing. So this aims, at ensuring that when multiple requests are, sent from different users simultaneously, that your servers can handle the load accordingly. So a tool that I'll talk about as part of this workshop is K6. So K6 is an open source tool that can help test your backend systems, but it's actually expanding to a more like use cases as well, such as browser testing or chaos testing. But as part of this workshop, I'll only focus on how you can use K6 to help you run performance tests for your backend systems. Okay, so with the different types of approach, so you saw that there's backend, there's front end, and then there's different loading types. You might ask if there is a priority as to which one is more important, and I can't really give you a direct answer because, as with everything, it depends. But what you can do is you can use guidelines. So there's one guideline which is called the golden rule of web performance. So this guideline states that about 80 to 90% of the load time of a web page or of an application, the bottleneck actually occurs in the front end. Now this is based on Steve Souders' findings. So you can see on this image that like the average front end times, it's significantly higher than the back end timings, which show that most of like the bottlenecks it actually occur in the front end. Now, if you don't have, for example, a lot of traffic on your website, and if you want to make performance improvements, I would recommend to start at the front end and then make, like small recommendations to your team. That's always a great idea. And then you can then expand to, testing your backend applications after. It's a guideline. So the golden rule of web performance, it's not always necessarily accurate. So especially if you have a lot of traffic arriving at your website, because if you have a lot of traffic, you can see that the front end response time, it remains roughly similar because, the bottleneck is only occurring on like your user's browser. So it's from a single point of view. But then once your back end starts to struggle with the increased concurrency, then you can see in this image that the back end time will start to grow exponentially. So if you have a lot of traffic, maybe you need to focus more on like the backend performance. But ideally, like my recommendation, it would be to consider both front end and backend performance testing so you have a holistic view of your application's performance. Now, moving on, I want to talk about, a bit about what performance testing tools are available out there because, there's a variety of tools and, depending on if you're doing front end or back end, these tools can help you in different ways. So I mentioned that, there's many tools, but I'll focus on using Google Lighthouse because I think this is one of the most widely used tool by like engineers. So if you haven't used Lighthouse, it's an open source tool that you can use to improve the overall quality. So not just performance, but the overall quality of your websites. Apart from measuring performance, it can also run audits for accessibility, SEO, and many more. Once you've run a Lighthouse audit, Lighthouse will generate a score, and then it will give you a report with suggested changes to improve the quality of your website. A vital metric that Google Lighthouse reports is, Google Web Vitals. So this is the current standard that engineers are using to measure the user experience, for a website. Currently, the Web Vitals are grouped into the core ones. So the core Web Vitals, so this comprise of LCP or largest contentful paint. So this basically measures your page loading performance. You also have first input delay or FID, which is a metric that can help you to measure your page's interactivity. And then finally, there's also CLS or cumulative layout shift, which measures your page's visual stability. If you've used Lighthouse, you might notice that Lighthouse doesn't really measure first input delay, because in order for first input delay to be like measured, it requires a real user interaction. And Google Lighthouse, so by default, it only analyzes like your initial page load, and it's also just using lab data. So this is data that's coming from a controlled environment, from like predefined network settings and so on. If you want to check how your real users are, not using, but what the Web Vitals are for your real users, there are other tools that you can use, such as Page Speed Insights or the Chrome User Experience Report. So this would allow you to have like a quick audit as to how your real users experience your website. But for this workshop, because we only really have like an hour, the fastest way that you can run, a web performance audit is via Chrome Developer Tools. So Martin, it's Page Speed Insights and Chrome User Experience Report. There's other tools out there, but I think this is what Google also recommends. Okay, so if you want to get started with Lighthouse, just open up your developer tools. You can click on the Lighthouse tab. You can choose to run the audit on either mobile or desktop. And then once you run it, you get a Lighthouse performance score calculated from the metrics that Lighthouse is tracking. So you can see like the score on your performance, whether you're a progressive web app, accessibility, and so on. Now, for a quick activity, and again, just looking at time, it's optional if you want to play around with Google Lighthouse. But what I can do is I can, quickly show you. So if I just open my Chrome, and what we can do is we can do a quick audit on my blog. So the quickest way, so you can see I'm just opening up my developer tools. And in here, I don't know if that is visible, but there is a Lighthouse tab. So again, by default, it's set to navigation. So it will just basically measure my page's initial load. So as you can see here, and I can choose whether that's mobile or desktop. And I can choose whether I want to run on just the performance category, analyze page load. Again, this might take time depending on like how like heavy or how slow your web page is, but at least this is one of like the tools out there that you can really let your team know that, hey, I run a set of Lighthouse tests. Maybe there's some improvements that we can do. So if you want to fix like any low-hanging like fruits in terms of like improving your web performance, then Google Lighthouse would be something quick. However, having said that, like don't just rely on Google Lighthouse, because as I mentioned, Google Lighthouse by default only uses lab data. So I mentioned you can use those like Page Speed Insights if you want to check how your real users are also experiencing your website. The Chrome User Experience Report. So this might not apply if your website doesn't have a lot of traffic. So what Chrome does is they basically gather like, a lot of like thousands and thousands of data from users who have opt-in. And then they would then check against like the different web vitals. So at least it gives you like real like results from like real users. The problem with Chrome User Experience Report though is that it's not updated regularly. So I believe like the data refresh happens every 28 days. So if you make improvements now, you might not see how it impacts your users after 28 days, for example. So this is where tools such as Lighthouse can really help. Okay, moving on. So from a backend perspective, the next tool that I'll talk about is K6. So I already mentioned that K6 is an open source tool, for running performance tests. But also there is a cloud version. So if you want to access like additional features, then, you can check out the K6 Cloud. But for this workshop, I just want to focus on the OSS side of things because most of the scenarios, like from like a backend performance like perspective, the K6 OSS can actually cover, most of like the different scenarios. So which is what I want to focus today. There are multiple ways to write a test in K6. So the first test is, via scripting, and this is actually the most common way of authoring. The test is written in JavaScript, so it should have some familiarity to users who are already coding with JavaScript. And because it's performance as code, K6 encourages you to shift performance testing as earlier, as possible. And then you can get it integrated as part of your CI and CD pipelines. So here is a very simple K6 test. So I'm just importing the HTTP module so I can make an HTTP request. And then anything that's inside this export default function. So this will be executed by a virtual user depending on like the configuration. So because this is a very simple test, this will just be executed by one virtual user and only just one like iteration. Akangwa, this is in JavaScript. Okay. So how can you configure your workload? So for example, if you want to, let's say, perform a different type of load test, such as, spike testing or like stress testing. So you can easily configure the number of virtual users that you want, or, how long they have to continuously send requests, or you can also specify like how many set iterations they should perform. So in K6, you can easily export like options and then define things like what is your VU, the duration, or the iteration as well. One important aspect though with backend performance is, you want to simulate like human behavior in real life. So in real life, people wait between interactions with the website. And then this is where like adding sleep or, think times can really help. Think times, occur between the requests, like in the load test scenario. And this is useful because you want to create a more accurate, like load simulation. Python equivalent Akangwa. So K6 is only, it's only JavaScript only. But if you look at Locus, then that is writing tests in Python. So you can also check that out. Let me type it here. So I think it's locus.io. Okay. So to run a test in K6, there are also multiple ways of doing it. So first is like running it in your local machine, which is what I'm going to demonstrate today. So this is just using the simple command K6 run followed by the script name. But if you, let's say, get access to Grafana Cloud K6, you can use K6 Cloud and then the file name. Or if you want to run it as part of like a Kubernetes cluster, then that is also allowed. But I won't cover those two as part of as part of this workshop. Now, when a test completes, so K6 will print the important metrics. So what you see here is actually the end of summary report. So all of the metrics that you see here, such as the HTTP, like the iteration, like the VUs, these are all built-in metrics. But you can also set up your own custom metrics depending on your goals and needs. So let's say you want to have like a custom metric that measures like a certain trend. Again, I won't cover that because that's more advanced, but it's good to know that tools such as K6 allows you to measure or to basically track like custom metrics as well. Now, this is where I'll probably spend maybe like 15 to 20 minutes of our time. And, you are also free like to follow along. But if you just want to watch me do it, and then if you have any questions, just feel free to use the chat. But what I will share, so let me just add this on the chat. So if you want to further learn more about like K6 in general, so we do have a public repo called K6 Learn. So this basically gives you like all the information that you need on how to get started with performance testing. It has the principles that I've discussed as, part of, like the initial part of this talk. And then if you want to get hands-on in terms of like K6 foundations and like more intermediate aspects, then you can just click on each of these different sections, and then that should lead you to like the code examples as well. But for now, so let's say I want to focus on this getting started with OSS. So you can actually just copy like some of the code as well. But the first thing that you would need to do, so if you have installed K6, you would need to check if you have installed properly. So the easiest way to do that is if you type K6 space version. So I'm using the latest version of K6 here. Let me just make that bigger. So you can see that, K6 is successfully installed in my local machine. And then I'm just going to create like a simple test file. So let me just create like a script.js and then open that as on my Visual Studio Code editor. Okay. And then the first thing that you would want to do, so there's a import step here. So we first need to import the HTTP. Could you please share your screen? Oh, is this not visible? I think I am sharing it, but can you see, for example, my VS Code now? It's visible. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to copy this import. So most of the tests that we do on the backend perspective, that is actually like protocol based. So in here, the most common protocol that we're gonna use to send requests is HTTP. So the first thing we need to do is import the HTTP module. And then I mentioned a while ago that anything that within this default function, this will be executed by our user. So you can see here that I'm just going to copy this directly. So I think this specific example wants us to, make a request to this specific test URL. And then we just want to make a post request. So we want to send a post request to this URL, and the data that we are posting is this just simple hello world. The next thing that I want to do is, for now, let's just log, the response to see that, if the post request has been successful. So I'm just gonna log the response, and then when I run my K6 test, we should see that, the data hello world is printed on our terminal. So as I mentioned, to run a K6 test, locally, we just need to do K6 run space and then the file name, which is script.js. So you can see here that it managed to log the data, which is hello world. And because I didn't specify any options or configuration, it's just executing one virtual user, one iteration. So you can see here that the iteration is one, the request is one, and it's just really using one maximum virtual user. So I think that's that. To understand the K6 CLI in much more detail. So this would probably be like the list of commands that you would use. To be honest, myself, I've only just used like the K6 version or like the K6 run command. And if I am stuck or if I forgot like other commands that I can use, I can just type K6 help, and then that should print the available commands that that is available that I can use. Okay. I mentioned that the simple tests only use one virtual user. But what if we want to, let's say, extend it so it's using like 2 virtual users or something? So to do that, again, we just use the command k6 run script, and then you can actually pass a flag, let's say views. And for this demo, I'm just gonna say 2 views, and the duration of the test would be, let's say, just 5 seconds, because I don't want this test to be quite long. So you can see here that it's continuously logging the hello world data, and it will stop execution after 5 seconds. So you can easily configure, the different options via the command as well. Okay. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you have a look at this K6 Learn and, just simply follow along, then I think this should give you a very great idea on how you can use K6 extensively. Let's have a look at this third module, understanding the end of test summary report. So whenever you print something on the terminal, so whatever you see here, so this is actually the aggregate or like the summary of all your tests run. So you can see here that in terms of any failed requests, there's none. Although when I first started using K6, this is where I got a bit confused, because if you look at this HTTP request failed, you might notice that, okay, I don't have any errors, but then it's saying here that I have 107 requests and there is like an X mark beside it. So this is just saying that out of all the 107 requests, there are no failures. So this is something that I got confused when I first started using K6. So if there are failures, you would see that, this percentage will increase, and then you would see like the number would increment here. So that would probably be one of the metric that, I was a bit confused on, but now I am aware as to what the difference is. Okay. You can also add checks. So as part of your test script, let's say you want to add some check that, the data was successful, or rather than like logging, the response from like the HTTP post request, we can actually add a check here that the body of, the post request that we just did includes hello world, like the response that we got. So to do that, K6 comes built in with a check module. So we need to first import check from K6, and then I'm just going to add that here. And then I'll remove the console log and replace it with this check. Okay, so what this is saying is we're calling in the like the check function. We are passing in the response. This one is just, a like a text that you can define just to, name what your check is. And then in here, you're just saying that RR is just, this response. It's saying that the response, that body should include hello world. Now, when I run this test, so if I go back to my terminal, I'll remove the view and duration because I just want to quickly show this run. So you can see that an additional check has been printed, it's passing, and then you might also notice that now there is a metric called check. So if you have like more than one check, this number here would increment, and you can see if there are any checks that are failing. Okay, so you can just have a look at this section here. I mentioned as well that think times are very important. So adding think times as part of your K6 test is also very simple. So you just need to import sleep from K6, and then just add the sleep. And I think this is in seconds. So for example, if I want to pause the test execution for like a second before running the next iteration or running the next virtual user, then I would just use sleep. You can also use like a dynamic sleep. So if you don't want to hard code, let's say a particular number of time, because in real life, users will probably have like different pauses. So what you can do is you can set like a dynamic think time. So in here, this is just using, basic JavaScript math function. So this will basically choose a random number between 0 and 5, and then whatever that random number is, that will be set as your value for the sleep. Okay. This one. Okay, so this is what I want to cover. So I demonstrated that you can pass in like the different flags for your views or duration, but what if you actually want to add that as part of your test? Let's say you want to check your test as part of your CI pipeline, and rather than passing in flags, you just want to, set the configuration as part of like your K6 test. So you can do that easily by exporting your configuration options within your test script. So to do that, I'm just going to copy the options. Again, these are all highly configurable. And let's say I want to just have like 2 iterations, which will be shared among 2 virtual users. And then if I run that, I don't need to pass in my flag, just run k6 run script.js. And you can see here that, yep, there are 2 iterations. And then this 2 iterations is shared among 2 virtual users. So again, depending on like the different load testing types that you want to simulate, you can easily configure these options here. Yes, so Furkan, that's a really great question. So K6, you can actually export the data that you're seeing and then visualize that, not only to a Grafana dashboard, but if you have any other observability dashboards that you can use, K6 allows you to basically just export the data and then you can display it on any platforms that you want. But yes, it is possible to use a Grafana dashboard and then display like the different K6 metrics. Okay. So I mentioned a while ago, especially if you want to do load testing, that it's important to model your traffic according to real life. So in a load test, like you probably won't have, let's say, 20 users like accessing your application at the same time. You would have stages to, ramp up. So this is where you are slowly starting seeing traffic from users, and then you might see times where the traffic is just constant, and then at the end, like during like the quiet times, this is where you can like simulate like the ramp down like option where your users are finished with using your service and they are now like going away or something. So to simulate that with K6, it is very easy. So you can specify like different stages. So in here, we're saying that for the first 30 minutes, I want to reach a target of 100 virtual users. So K6 will automatically allocate like 100 virtual users, in the duration that you have specified. And then the next stage here is you're saying that for the next 1 hour, I want to keep that 100 users. So they would just continuously send like a number of like iterations. And then for the last 5 minutes, I want to slowly ramp down so that from 100, I don't have any virtual users right at the end. So again, this would totally depend. Like there's no like, hard or, like fast rules as to what these numbers are, because it depends as to, what your real life traffic is. But K6 allows you to mimic like these different like workload profiles as easily as possible. Okay. I'm not gonna do that because I don't want my test to run for like 1 hour. But yeah, you can just have a look at this code. Setting test criteria. Yes. So imagine that you have like SLO. So you have like service level objectives where you have a rule that you don't have like 10 failing requests or something. So if you want to verify your SLOs, K6 allows you to do that via threshold. So for example here, it's saying that I don't want to have failed requests. So the failed request should only be like 5%. If it's like more than 5%, then the threshold will fail and then your test will fail as well. So I think I just need to specify the thresholds and then the duration. So this is just saying that for the 95th percentile, so for the 95th like percentage of requests, I want the duration to be less than 5 seconds. So if I run this and then just use K6 run, you can see that yep, there are no errors. The different thresholds that we have specified as well, it's within the thresholds that have happened. So you can also see additional checks here. If there are any failures, so you would see that there's gonna be like a cross here, and then it will tell you like what the actual like duration is for that specific like percentile. So you can easily set up your thresholds as well. And I think the last part that I want to just cover, so far, I've only demonstrated like how you can view like the end of summary report. So this is related to what for example what Furkan said. So if you want to export like your data to like a specific dashboard, then there are different ways of outputting your results from K6. So you can either save the results as a CSV file. So the command is here. We just have to pass the out flag, pass like the CSV key and then the file name that you want. Or if you want to also save it as a JSON file, then you just need to pass JSON and then give it a file name. Or if you want to use K6 Cloud, so I won't cover K6 Cloud, but there is the option as well of exporting your tests to K6 Cloud. So rather than saying K6 run, so it would be K6 run, and I think it's out, and I just need to pass in cloud. But I think this would require me to log in to have a K6 Cloud token. So I will skip that because that's more like intermediate. But the important thing is if you want to export your K6 test to different formats, then that is also allowed. Okay, so make sure to have a look at this K6 Learn workshop. I've added it as part of the chat. So if you want to know more about like how to use it in much more detail, if you want to look at like the intermediate lessons as well, then feel free. If you have any suggestions, so we have like stuff that we want to continually add as part of this workshop, so you can always raise an issue. So that we can improve this workshop for everyone. Okay, so just gonna close this and go back to my presentation. Okay, so to perform a load test, I think the most common way that I've demonstrated is like the protocol base. So this is where you're importing an HTTP like module, and then you just want to simulate like sending requests, which basically involves like doing a get request or a post request, and this will bypass your application's UI. So your requests will be sent directly to your API or to a component. There are, of course, advantages of doing protocol based. So one advantage that I can think of is this can be like integrated earlier. You don't need to wait for a UI to exist. You can just target like specific API endpoints, like as you can see here. And then this will basically mean that you can promote like this shift left performance testing approach. Protocol-based load testing is also less resource intensive, so you don't need to spin up a browser instance because it's just really a matter of sending different HTTP requests, which is something that you can scale pretty cheaply. While there are advantages, there's always like disadvantages as well. So first one is protocol based. It won't really tell you anything what's happening on the front end. So it ignores the user experience. Your test scripts as well, it can also get very long, especially if you want to mimic like complex user flows that might look simpler when you script it via the browser level. When you work as well with microservices-based application, it could get difficult to maintain as the application grows. Now, on the other hand, I think I mentioned that K6 can also perform browser-based testing. So another approach to load test is browser-based load testing. So this is where you verify the performance of your application by simulating real users using a browser to access your website. So this might include, navigating to a page, typing out the login details, clicking the login button. And because those user actions will trigger the underlying request on the protocol level, it's much more closer to what your users see because the test is being driven from the browser perspective. So this would normally be generated by like multiple browsers, which can be resource intensive. So you need to be careful as to how many like set of browser instances you want. So this could be like one limitation is that it depends on like how your machine can handle like a bunch of like browsers like starting up. So this could be quite costly and this could be more resource expensive as well. So yep, I mentioned that limitation. To get the best of both worlds, so an approach that you can do is, you can basically perform this hybrid load test. So a hybrid load test, so this involves simulating the majority of your load on the protocol level, and then simultaneously, so at the same time, you have one or two browser virtual users accessing like the front end. And if you remember from this golden rule of web performance, the front end application, it remains fairly constant throughout different levels of load. So even if you only have one or two virtual users, you'll still get a lot of useful insights on both types of performance without really worrying too much about like the scaling costs. You can achieve this with different tools, but then like with different tools, you have to maintain like different repo. It might be different languages. So it's probably might better if you look for a tool that can target both types of performance, and this is where K6 can help. So this is just a very quick example. So I've got a different function here for my browser, a different function here for my protocol. And then as part of the options, I only have one browser virtual user. And then on the protocol level, I can configure this to, let's say, like 20 or more. Okay. So I think I'm on my last 5 minutes. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up. So as summary, more performance testing is more than doing load testing. There's different approaches, different load testing types that you have to consider. So you have to make sure that you cater for those. Ideally, you would want to do both front end and back end. So, have a look at this hybrid approach. And there are a bunch of performance testing tools, but it's also important to test beyond. So test beyond like, what your real users are experiencing. So make sure that you test for their perceived like performance as well. And then to learn more, so the K6 Learn, that's a very useful resource, the k6.io/docs. So if you want to know more about K6, you can visit that. There is a blog post that I wrote. So if you want to know more about the psychology of waiting or the psychology of performance, I have a blog post specifically about that. And if you want to know more about the K6 browser demo, I have a public GitHub repo that I've shared as well. And when you're playing Overcooked, don't try to set your kitchen on fire. And yeah, that is me. Hopefully you find this introductory lesson useful. If you have any questions, you can reach me on my Twitter handle at mcruzdrake, or you can go to my personal blog and fill in like the contact section. So yeah, thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, maybe we can have one, if there is any. You go through the chat, so I think you already covered everything. Thank you for the nice session.
Yes. Let me just go to the first, I think, the QR code for, there you go. It's not showing. There you go. Okay. So if you just want to quickly take a picture of the slides so that you have access to all the resources, access to all the code base, to all the different, like info, feel free to take a picture.